Okay, so I can speak for my previous institution because I just got in my new role. And I don't really have transfer responsibilities in my new role. But the previous role I did. So the transfer process, ironically, not ironically, but it really hasn't changed. It's been the same. The only difference is instead of asking for because everyone used to say like I want a release, right? Your release is essentially your notification of transfer. That's you telling them that I want to transfer. The only difference between it is instead of asking for a piece of paper, we put you in a system that everyone can see. So that's the biggest difference between when you and I were in school and now, if that makes any sense. So the transfer portal process, like that process has been in place for years. There's just never been a database to actually keep track of it. Now there's data. Now there's visibility to show how many people are actually in the transfer portal, how many people are actually quote unquote tampering. That notification process, a timestamp on everything. That's the same, like nothing, like, okay, so everyone's transfer rules right now, the transfer rules has never changed. Not yet. Like it's gonna get voted April. For people like me, I hope it gets voted on in April. Like, let's be honest, because I deal with it. But the transfer rule it's still the same. So sports other than football, basketball, baseball, hockey, all have a one-time transfer exception. There are exceptions to the rules for everyone else that don't have that. One, needing a grad transfer. If you graduated, you finished your first degree and you want to transfer, boom, grad school. That's an exception. The walk-on exception, if you did not receive aid at your first institution, you can transfer without being penalized. There's also interconference transfer rules, which is why there's a whole lot of other issues. Each conference has their own transfer rules. The ACC, the first major Power Five conference, has eliminated their intertransfer rules. So, you can transfer from Florida State to Duke and not have to sit out. Like they are eliminated, they're getting ahead of the game for all sports, right? There's still the NCAA rule for the sports other than football. For football, basketball, baseball, and if they have hockey, like those are the sports, ice hockey rather, that have that transfer restriction, right? And it's pretty much in place because they're trying to prevent like the Wild Wild West happening. They want you to make sure that you sit a year to make sure you have your like academics in place. And a lot of people in the past used to transfer and not be eligible in the classroom. Well, if you're not eligible in the classroom and you're there, that kind of defeats the purpose of you transfer. And it goes back to what the NCAA already said previously, like, no, you need a year to get your life together. Then you got it on track and you can balance it. Right now, the only way around it are waivers. You file a waiver. There's pre-approved waiver exceptions, and there's some where they have guidelines, and there's different categories. One being closer to home, one being like pregnancy, mental health, a bunch of other things. Like they didn't have my degree program, stuff like that. Those are some not exceptions, but waiver guidelines. So if your situation, egregious behavior is a new one as well. So those are situations that if you fall into those categories, you have enough information to defend the fact that this is what happened to you and this is why you left, then a waiver can be filed on your behalf. And then you bring it to the NCAA. It's AMA is what they're called. You bring it to the AMA, they go through it, see if it's approved or not. If it gets denied, you can go through an appeal process so that the first group is like, okay, does it meet the legislation and does it meet the problem? And they either say yes or no. Thankfully, every time I had one, I've had case managers that were just like, okay, Ashley, like, this is the situation. I don't think you get approved, but like, let's see if we can get it approved, right? Everyone's not super mean in AMA that's going through these waivers, contrary to what people believe. Also, contrary to what people believe, they're not easy. You're seeing waivers get approved left and right. That's those compliance departments working their tails off to make sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed, pulling as much information as possible, trying to sell a compelling story to make sure the best outcome comes for that student athlete. I I know firsthand, like they're not easy. They're not quick. Like they're not black and white, not all the time. And they don't, turn around in 2 days. Like you can't ask for a waiver on Monday and expect it to be approved on Wednesday. Like the waiver probably won't even get filed to 2 weeks later because you have to come up with so much information and to do so much research. Me personally, I do a lot of research. I go back and look through previous cases to see if I can cite, like, okay, like this is a fact pattern that happened with a different person. They approved this. I'm going to use this so they have something to cite to see if that's helpful as well, along with a lot of documentations. So those are things, for the whole waiver process. Updated, excuse me, pretty often.